Hey there YouTube, Travis here. So, we are going to tear into this Tomos A35. If you remember from the last video, this is a moped which very much has a ton of miles on it and was really well enjoyed, and it has recently stopped working for its prior owner. So, we're going to go ahead and try to get it going first. Let's see if we can get this bike back into basic operating order, and then we're going to tear into the transmission, because I know for certain there is some stuff with this bike that is really not right. So here's what I know about Tomos A35s, especially ones that have been sitting for a long time. These cylinder studs in here, these will get a lot of rust on them, and it will make removing the cylinder really difficult if it's never been off. I'm trying to do what I can for now. Every other day or so I've been coming out and I've been hitting the head nuts with some penetrating oil, with the hope that it will make this entire experience a little easier. Let's see if we get lucky. We're starting with a top end inspection here because this thing got a big fail when I hooked it up to my compression tester. Unlike a Puch, Tomos will use 11mm socket for the head nuts. These all broke loose pretty easily. I'm thinking that's because I was spraying it with penetrant for a couple days. When I tore apart an A35 of equal vintage, one of the studs actually came out with it instead of getting all four of the head nuts off. Didn't spray the penetrant that time. There are 4 washers. The 3 are just stuck to the inside of the head still. You can see that there's definitely a leak here. If you can look, this bottom stud doesn't look like it has any rust, but this top one has a ton, and that's going to be all the way down, and that's just going to make it that much more difficult to get the cylinder off here. A little bit of goop here, maybe some sort of head sealant. Maybe someone, long before we got our hands on this bike, was inside here. We'll find out. It's kind of neat. Next, we'll drop the exhaust and also remove the intake and take a look at the reeds, because in addition to having an issue with the piston, this could also be a culprit too if those reeds fail. Rear of the pipe loose. Already took the nuts off for the exhaust. Man, we even have washers for the exhaust nuts. That's neat. Quick note, most A35s did not come with a head gasket. From what I've read online, some of the really early ones did, and of course the later A55s did, but from the factory, not having a head gasket here is quite common. These bottom ones right here are always fun for getting this intake off. With the Delorto carb out of the way, you can get to this bottom one much easier. So, there you go. There's your reeds right there. Hard to tell from here, but you know, they're not broken, which is what I was expecting. Huh, interesting. So now is the fun part. Time to spray a little bit more oil to see if we can snake it down those passages next to the studs. Because getting this thing off, just from experience, is not going to be easy. Okay, so been at this for about 10 minutes, hosing the cylinder base and the individual studs with the PB, and using some very light mallet taps on all 4 corners. Definitely a rubber mallet, or you know, if you just have a metal hammer, a block of wood maybe, just gently. You don't want to bust one of the fins on the side of this. And it is coming, like the whole thing is separated, but it comes about 1 millimeter or 2, and that's all we get. All right, this is a good feeling. It's coming. You can just see how rusted those studs are there. All right, and here's our cylinder. Honestly, it looks pretty good. You know, minus the rust and the obvious exhaust leak here. The bore of the cylinder looks pretty good. A few light marks, but you can see in the camera there towards the bottom, but they're not deep. The walls of this cylinder are so smooth. There is no factory cross-hatching left in there, but I guess that's to be expected for the mileage. So the cylinder, I think, is good. This will clean up and be able to be reused. I cannot say the same for this piston right here. As you can see, there are some chunks out of the top right there, and those rings are not moving anymore. So this is 100% the reason we have low compression This will make some nice artwork for somebody. Well, I'm going to have to go order some parts, so we will resume this when I have those in my hand. So before ordering those parts, curiosity got the best of me. I went ahead and removed the piston, which most of us have seen before, but there are 2 piston circlips on each side that you remove with needle nose pliers, then a wrist pin which pushes out, and inside the crank is this needle bearing. Now, one of my theories was, maybe one of the needles broke or popped out of this, which led to the piston being gouged up, but nope, they're all here, all accounted for. This is a wear item. This needle bearing gets replaced, just like the C-clips and the piston, because it is so damaged, as well as the rings. So all this will be discarded. But when we look at the crank up here, one thing that was really concerning to me, and the reason I wanted to check this was, you can have some side-to-side play. That's a decent amount of side-to-side play. But what you don't want is up and down play. You want none of that. And with this, this is the crank moving up and down. And, it's only moving by about 2 or 3 millimeters, but even that, you really don't want that. So this is now turning into a full bottom end rebuild. And because this is now a full rebuild, I'm also going to open up this case and let's take a quick look at the condition of the clutches and the gears. All right, so we're gonna go ahead, loosen the bolt under here and drain out all the transmission fluid. Pardon my spillage, but does not look like there was all that much fluid in there. So now, cotter pin comes out, loosen this up, don't take it off all the way, get it to the edge, and then you can whale on this with a block of wood and a hammer or a rubber mallet so you don't damage the threads on the end of the cotter pin. And that's off. So now go ahead and remove all the Allen key bolts that are around this cover. Okay, so these are all short bolts, except for one long one right here under this bolt that goes to the top of the engine here. I'm gonna try and clean the pedal shaft a little bit so there's no crud to mess up the seal here. At least that's what the wiki said to do. Now this thing should just pull off. All right, here's our first look at the clutches. Well, first I should mention that there were 2 washers stacked on top of each other here. They were actually sitting in the case when I pulled it off. Looks like we have another washer to keep track of right here. And this is our first gear clutch, which we're looking at, which, as you can see, this material is hanging off the sides here like this. I am gonna say that this clutch is either in need of relining or replacement. So to get to the second gear clutch assembly, I'm going to take this nut off, which normally you'd use like a piston stop or something because this whole assembly is going to turn, but my piston's no longer there. So I'm going to try this strap wrench held firmly against here, and then I'm going to try to impact it off. Let's see how lucky I get. Get really lucky, actually. That worked like a charm without much effort at all. So there's the nut itself, and then there's this special washer behind it. Now, before we go any further, one thing worth mentioning, there is a washer that sits behind this gear assembly, and I was looking for it and I couldn't find it. And it's because this seal was popped out, and it was flush with this washer. Here's the washer right here. You can see I'm moving it a little bit. But this seal was totally popped out, and I'm wondering if that also was contributing to the no start condition, or if that just kind of came out when I pulled the whole clutch assembly off. Weird stuff. Either way, this crank seal, when we tear this whole thing down, will get replaced. Now, I would like to look at second gear. From what I've read, obviously first gear is going to wear out long before second gear, and just eyeballing this, it looks all right. But let's get this big circlip off the back and see what it looks like. All right, so that circlip is off, and here is your second gear clutch assembly, which Unlike the first gear, these pads aren't mashed down or anything, or they don't have any chunks out of them. Definitely makes sense that second gear is the gear with the less wear on the clutch assembly. So, hope you found that interesting. Nothing scientific here, just doing a teardown so I know what parts to order. When it comes to remedying this, there are some really good posts online in the Moped Army Wiki for relining these clutches, which it looks like you can totally do yourself with some cork material, some Gorilla Glue, and a large hose clamp to hold it all together. I'd have to go out and buy all that stuff, which would probably run me around $20. You can buy an aftermarket first gear clutch on Treats for about $33. I may do that. If you wanted to do performance, they do sell the jammer clutch for first gear for about $100. But realistically, this bike is almost certainly just going to be a bi-turbo and a stock top end, so we're not doing anything crazy here. Probably going to leave second gear alone and probably buy the first gear replacement, but we'll see. Anyway, YouTube, hope you enjoyed that little teardown. This is definitely not the end of the story for this bike. We will be splitting the case, installing a new crank, new seals and gaskets, different first gear clutch probably, and a new top end, some basic wiring, and we'll see if we can't take this thing out for a ride. Okay, YouTube, until next time.